What's going on?
Hello. Well, we're in the middle of a heat wave. Here you can just see us going to the shops and we're literally going from shade bits to shade bits. So we've got fans on and everything, and it's about our third week of similar weather that you'd probably be dealing with daily there. But we have no aircon, so my bedroom's about 40 degrees. And
Oh, wow. See, I thought people think English heat wave, 28 degrees, 40 degrees. That's hot anywhere. That's forget about not suitable for humans. That's like nearly the surface temperature of Venus.
I was lying on bed like this the other night, and like my dog, little Lola, the schnoodle, she's panting away, but she still wants to get close to me. I'm like, no, you're too hot. Do
Yeah.
not come in the vicinity of me.
And
Uh,
you're furry too. It's just like, no, this is just not going to work out. My cat is on the keto diet. All he eats is fat and protein. He won't even consider a carbohydrate. Doesn't matter what it is. But pure butter, if you put like a dab of like pure organic butter on your finger, you give it to him, couldn't be happier. Energy levels are high. He looks great. He's quite muscular. Whatever he's doing within his diet and his training program really works for him. He's got a bit of a belly, but that's like normal for middle-aged cats. He's 5 now, so you can't really hold that against him. It's the other cat that I'm worried about because he's over 2 years old now. So basically, he should be full grown, and he still looks like a big kitten and sounds like he's got this little voice. He's got this little tiny skinny body. He looks like a kitten. It's like, what stunted your growth? I don't understand. You get plenty of enrichment, but these two cats are they're like a life lesson. The older one, the bigger one, he's super intelligent, thinks about everything, lives inside his own head though, constantly anxious about absolutely everyone. The little guy lives out there in the world, not in his head at all. He's like the happy wanderer. Nothing phases him. He's constantly engaged in one adventure after another. And he just seems oblivious, like to everything that's outside of his area of focus, because he's captivated by everything. So you have this people like that, they're like so intelligent and works against them. They overthink about everything and they live through this anxiety and neuroticism.
if you were the other cat then and you wanted to give your anxious cat a little bit of advice or support, should I say, not advice, you know, what would you, in your cat voice, say?
You're asking me if I were a cat
Yes.
that was free spirited, what advice would I give to another cat that overthinks a lot?
Yes, anxious, overthinking cat. Because I think a lot of us can relate to that.
See, this is what I imagine mushrooms in the 60s were like these types of conversations. I bet you a lot of the cartoons that we had started with a couple of people doing peyote in the mountains having conversations just like this. So imagine you're a free spirited cat, but I'm an anxious cat. How do I know what one cat would think, not to mention say to another cat?
If you were to think about it for not too long, is there anything you think, oh, maybe you might encourage the cat to come with you on a night out?
A
No.
night out, like on the balcony
Yes.
with the plants. Yeah, I might invite the cat out. So we were talking earlier offline about the dimensions of well-being and fitness and like where they live and how we have this propensity where whatever our tool is, and you'll see this, right? There's something happens, like a train derails, and it's like, okay, everybody survives. People are banged up. No matter what your worldview is, that is exactly how you're going to interpret that train crash. Like everybody who's religious is like, well, okay, God had his hand on all those people, and that's why nobody got hurt. Right. And then somebody else is like, well, the engineering of the train is very good. So if that was like 30 years ago, it would have been catastrophic. So that's a testament to science and engineering. And it's like however you frame the world relates back to what your fundamental belief system is. And that goes back to like Maslow's, he who's good with a hammer thinks everything's a nail. So if you're in fitness, the solution to everything is just like move more or exercise. If you're a dietitian, it's diet. And it's like, I think right now, as the world's getting more dynamically complex, one of the big issues that people are dealing with, and it's pervasive, is burnout. And we talk about burnout, but we talk about it from the lens I think of whatever our core competency is. I feel like that's dangerous because it goes back to, we've talked about this before. What's the tool that
Mhm.
solves this problem? And sometimes it's not as simple as a single isolated tool, is it?
No, and it was interesting what you were just saying. I just wondered if we could rewind a little bit because you said so much there. And what you said with the train crash as well, was we see it through our lens, which comes from our past experiences. And so our experiences, our anticipation of this train crash, of why more people didn't die, or whatever that is. So what I'm saying is we come to a destination, but none of us have taken the same route there. We've had a different environment that we've lived in. We've had different influences. We've had different positive experiences, different negative experiences, which means that we're all totally unique when we come into this scenario, for example. So if we kind of put that into the picture, when we come to burnout, like you rightly said, there isn't one tool because, first of all, we'd need to know the mechanism, the whole history, every experience this person has gone through, the belief system they have, and the lens they see it through. So that's really not complicated, complex. There's a lot of
Mhm.
different balls in that. How do we start to narrow it down or find something that isn't just a generic tool or answer, but what can we do to try and find a strategy to help?
I think one thing is avoiding, and this is easier said than done, avoiding attachments. So a lot of times what we do is tied into our identity. So it becomes the totality of everything we see and how we explain and how we navigate through the world. And that's fine. You don't have to abandon that, I don't think. I reckon it's a matter of here's what I'm not seeing in every conversation out there in the world. And it's far more intensified on social media because you're not actually dialoguing, you're exchanging monologues, but there's no curiosity. It's like, here's the answer. Nope, wrong. The answer's this because it's back. Nobody asks questions. Like you just said, hey, that's interesting. I don't really see it that way. How did you arrive at that conclusion? And usually it's an extreme conclusion and it's encapsulated in this categorization, whether it's left versus right, capitalism, socialism. We're throwing around these words without examining, hey, well, when you say that, can I just ask you what you mean by that and what you think other people's motivations for engaging the way that they're engaging might be? I feel like if we engaged curiously, not to condone, not to agree with, but just to understand, first of all, I reckon right there, we wouldn't have a need to have our single isolated tool or explanation. Because if something doesn't line up with the way we see it, it wouldn't be a threat to us. Just because you want to understand why somebody is the way they is, or the way they are, rather, or feels the way they do, it doesn't necessarily make you wrong.
Yeah.
You don't. Somebody else doesn't have to be wrong for you to be right, and being right is worthless. So I think the first step is letting go of your presuppositions and being curious, and understanding that two things can be true at the same time. Because when you talk about burnout, you have one camp that's like, if only, and it sounds more like an accusation than a revelation. If only you would identify your vision and your passion, you'd be more engaged at work. And I feel like that's true because we're not working any longer and harder. And this is going to be an offensive statement to a lot of people, but we're not working longer and harder in 2026 than we were in 1996. Like if you think about what was going on in 1996 and the late 1990s with the whole dot-com boom, people were working really hard, but the incidence of burnout was much lower. And you got to ask what was different. And I think what has changed is the dynamic complexity, the lack of predictability, and basically elements within our environment that has made the hours we work so much more taxing on us physically, so much more taxing on us cognitively and emotionally. So there's a much greater dynamic complexity, but it's not necessarily effort or hours at work. So does vision and purpose work as a strategy to fight burnout? Yeah, absolutely. people who have a deeply entrenched sense of purpose, if you're working 100 hours a week, that's not sustainable either. So somebody might need to actually take a step back. And you have one end of people talking about burnout, like, okay, you need to decompress and recover. And they're right. And then another group is going, no, you need to identify what's important to you and grow and develop a sense of agency. And I think they're right as well. So when you have all of these variables and people's situations overlap in the similarities, but there's also important nuances and differences, what do you do? And I kind of think going back to the fitness industry, when you look at any program design model, well, what are you trying to do first, second, and third, and why is that important? Because that gives you direction, but it also gives you adaptation. When I look at something as complex as burnout with so many contributing variables, what I'm thinking is, okay, I'm burnt out today. And like, let's just define burnout. Burnout is what happens when chronic stress goes unmanaged. It's not about stress. It's about chronic, long-term unmanaged stress, resulting in complete physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. That's really hard, especially if you're not in a position where if you stopped working today, you're financially independent enough where it wouldn't be a problem for a while. If you've got people depending on you, you have to go into that job. And the job market's very competitive. I mean, look at the rate of change, look at the access and the necessity to manipulate information. And now you have AI. So you have all of these emerging tools and challenges that are very unique. I got to walk into a meeting and perform. Like, I don't really have time today to cultivate my vision and really connect with my purpose. That's like saying, 20,000 years ago, I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Now's not the time to contemplate like the creation of fire. Worry about that later, assuming there'll be a later. Right now, I just need to survive this. So how do I survive today? So I think phase number one is around self-regulation. Because if I don't self-regulate, I'm probably not going to be creative, insightful, and have the executive function to contemplate why this is meaningful to me in the first place, or what this looks like in my future vision. So one, I got to regulate. Now, if I have 30 days, well, now I need to physiologically optimize. Now is a really good time to look at what are my sleep patterns? What are my dietary habits? Are the foods I'm eating contributing to, or are they, helping me to fortify against all of this stress in my environment? Am I moving? Am I exercising? What are my thought patterns? Am I taking rest? I think phase three is integration. How do I integrate skills and core competencies into a cultural environment that helps how I engage with other people? Because that's a big part of burnout. So maybe not 30 days from now, but what about 6 months from now? What am I working on?
Can I just backtrack slightly, just because there's a lot going on there?
Mm-hmm.
And before we get to phase three, if you like, if we go back to phase one, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was hearing was communication and going from whether you're in the workplace, whether you're online, but that ability to be curious
Mm-hmm.
and find out what somebody else is thinking, but ultimately feeling. Because you don't just arrive at work burnt out, you are starting to struggle. Maybe your boss has higher expectations on you, or you're not clear what those expectations are. And if you don't know what success,
That's a bigger problem.
if you don't know what success looks like, you might be thinking you're doing a great job. But if those two images don't match, you're always going to be failing in your boss's eyes, and you're not going to be able to understand why. So that expectation of what success is, which makes me think of the communication. So if we're looking after our team, we need to know that they know what success looks like, they know what expectations are, and whether they have the resources to be able to do that. But are we as leaders giving them the opportunity to communicate that?
Mm-hmm.
So I was hearing that you were saying listening is really important. Um, from there, now I've got to remember, because there was so much you were talking about, and I'm like, right, I've got to remember this. So listen to someone, hold that space for them to know what's important to them without judgment as well, I think was one of the things that you were saying. That, or whether you said that with being online, when someone has a different of opinion, you're not there to share your opinion. You just want to hear from the person you're talking to. Um, Once you've established that, phase two, remind me, where do we go from there?
Well, one, I just want to stop you here because I feel like one of the most important aspects that contributes or detracts from the quality of our lives are conversations. I truly believe that better conversations are the key to or the lock on our well being, our level of quote unquote success, however that shows up for you, our relationships and life satisfaction. And it's not necessarily conversations with other people, it can be the conversations that we're having inside our own head at any given moment. So, conversations, and this is where the first phase, which is until I self regulate, I'm not going to be really good at doing anything else with any level of consistency. Part of that is listening. It's listening to yourself. It is listening to others. And that's where phase three, like, what is that integration like? What are the dynamics I have with other people? So, where I now take my purpose and connect that to other people in a way that matters. Because without contribution, there's no purpose. Something might be meaningful, but it's not purposeful until it touches somebody else in a way that they deem as valuable. I think that's really important because we all need to contribute.
Do
But
you
yeah, it
have,
starts with listening.
she says as she interrupts you.
No, because what I'm saying is when you listen, think about what happens. You're completely present. You are silencing the constant chatter in your own head. You're connecting to another person. You don't have all this angst and anger that comes from vitriol and judgment or this never ending lines of shoulds, how people should think, what they should believe, how they should live some aspect of their life, which really isn't helpful to you if you're walking around with that level of anxiety and anger 24/7. So when you start being present, that's a form of mindfulness. Because what is mindfulness? It's the intentional direction of your focus on what is happening in the moment, moment by moment. But when you do that with another person conversationally, you're not only filtering out all of those other things that detract from emotional regulation, you're also connecting with someone on a deep level. So Barbara Fredrickson in her research shows that the biochemical consequence of that, oxytocin being like one of those, inoculates people that are engaged in meaningful connection from the deleterious or the adverse impact of stress. It doesn't make your life less stressful, but it protects you from a lot of the damage and the consequences of that stress. We seem to be doing the opposite.
Do you have a time in your life where you remember feeling that somebody's really listened to you?
Yeah. Oh, you want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Um, I feel like there's been a lot of times where I feel I've had someone holding space and I've been completely listened to. I feel that I have that with Amy, my wife, because we can talk. And I mean, it's not like that all the time. I mean, we're running around, we got a lot of things going on. There's times where she would insist I'm not listening, and vice versa. Ian O'Dwyer. Ian O'Dwyer is wherever he is, he has this ability to be completely present. And when that presence is directed at a conversation, it makes Ian not only a safe space, but a highly engaging person to talk to about just about anything. It could be frivolous, like what do they got on draft behind the bar, or it could be something like relationships and family, falling in love. So I've had all these amazing conversations with Ian. Ian is a great natural listener. He's always present, not just within the conversation around words, but even movement. Like, what's the body doing? What is the body saying? He's always saying, like, ask the body. It's like, you're not going to get down and ask somebody's ankles a question and expect an answer unless you're using some of those drugs we were talking about earlier. But there is an observation, there is deep listening involved there. So I've been on the receiving end of that quite a bit.
Have you had that within a workspace?
Not as often. I feel that the coaches I work with, well, in the past, yeah. I feel working with coaches, you have people who intentionally want to move further into that space, not for one another and for their own development and journey. Because listening is that is the critical skill. It's the key to or the lock on absolutely everything else in my mind. So I've experienced that with teams I've worked with, teams I've led. Um, and, and a lot of times in the workspace, it's like, okay, we've got 30 minutes. Let's fill this with content. Let's fill this with takeaways. Let's fill this with agenda items. And there's a lot of information being disseminated, but I don't know how much deep listening is taking place. I think you need a little bit more fluidity. You need a little bit more space for that.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because in the workplace, suddenly the listening becomes about the takeaways, the work. Yet, if someone feels like their boss remembers that they went to a wedding at the weekend and knows what that person was doing just slightly outside of work as well, they feel valued within the workspace because they feel like they're part of it, that somebody's actually remembered what they're doing, not just
Mm.
a piece in the puzzle of somebody else's workforce.
Yes, and right. So I
Mhm.
mean, there's this thing about what's going on in people's personal lives. Like I know the people that I work with in my company are, for the most part, very likable people. So it's easy for me to take an interest in what's going on in their lives because I like them and because we're coming together working towards the same objectives, which I think creates a lot of cohesion. So if someone's kid is sick, that I'm mindful of that all the time. It's like I'll send them a text and they'll be on my mind constantly. And I know I'll reach out and I'll connect. So there's this like, what happened? What'd you do with your kids over the weekend? Where'd you go? How did that feel? There's that. But I think it also shows up not in just about subject matter,
Mhm.
but what's going on right now. Like, what is this person thinking or feeling related to work? So I don't think it has to be, oh, so, did you watch the football this weekend? Oh, it's like, that's great. But I think there's different levels of taking an interest in people.
Yeah.
I think because the work is what has to show up the majority of time at work, it's how you engage with that. Because I think a 30-minute meeting that's packed with agenda items takes up far more time than a 3-hour exploratory meeting where you have an agenda, you have a direction, but a lot of that is unbound and you could wander about a little bit exploring. Because I think in those meetings, you discover things and you find answers, mostly around root cause analysis, that move you so much further along. Like my boss, he did a presentation at one all staff meeting. God, let me try to remember this, but it was on root cause analysis. And one of the things that we believe in our Western society is it's about solutions. Like, what's the solution? What's the problem you're solving? And it's like, spend as little time on the problem, identify the problem, now create a solution. And there's this other perspective credited to Einstein, accurately or falsely, I have no idea. But Einstein supposedly said, and I agree with this insight, regardless of where it came from, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend about 55 minutes on the problem, 5 minutes on the solution. And that's outright heresy in our culture. Like you got that exactly opposite. I'd spend 5 minutes on the problem, 55 minutes on the solution. But here's what happens. So they had this instance at the Jefferson Memorial. I'm trying to remember his example. It was brilliant years ago, where there was so much bird poo, like literally all over the stairs. And like people would get shat on and it really ruins your day. And they were trying to figure out like, okay, how do we get rid of this? And let's just high pressure hose this constantly. Well, that would make the stairs slippery. And in high traffic hours, that could increase, injury and litigation. So there's just all these issues. And somebody had the idea, maybe we should try to figure out why there's more bird poo on this Jefferson Memorial than anywhere else in Washington, D.C. I mean, one, the birds might legitimately hate this memorial. Like this memorial sucks. I'm going to shit on it. but there might be something else going on. And they figured out that the reason why there were so many birds in that area is because they were eating spiders. They were hunting. And like, okay, well, we got to get rid of these spiders because the spiders are bringing the birds. So that's one level of root cause analysis. But then I was like, why do we have so many spiders here?
Yeah.
Well, because there's more bugs hovering in this area than anywhere else. Okay, what's bringing the bugs? And then they kept asking more and more questions to get a fuller understanding of the problem. And it's like, no, there's the most amount of bugs at a certain time in the morning. And basically it's where the memorial was sat, and it's the twilight hours. And when they turn on the lights, it attracts all of these bugs at a certain time of day. And it's like, maybe we should just not turn the lights on at that particular time. And there's not a lot of people there. So, we can experiment with this. And when they did that, they got rid of the bugs, which got rid of the spiders, which got rid of the birds, where they would have kept on putting. And we do this so often. People do this in sales. Let's go straight to solution. You have zero understanding of the problem and the implications. So jumping to solutions takes so much more time. Because one, you're probably not going to get that sale. Or in a meeting, you're probably going to have so many more meetings than if you would have just sat with it and explored the root cause.
I think that's just such a great analogy. And it's exactly the same when we're teaching personal trainers. If we jump to what we think the problem is, the barrier is to our solution, we haven't actually got to what the real barrier to movement is, for example. And, if someone jumps...
And there might be more than one.
Yeah, absolutely. Or the person might discover it en route when you're having the chat. Like you didn't even know the spiders were there. And that's often where your client has this epiphany. And I think that carries over in the workplace as well. Just so it's that matter of finding out what's important, why that's an issue underneath that. The other thing I thought was interesting, we're talking about like the kids, knowing when someone had kids. We had an example of this in the gym where one of the team members was struggling because they were a single parent. And so part of their stress levels were increased because they struggled with opening up and they struggled with closing. And it wasn't until we started to look at how could we be more flexible. Now, obviously, if you said to everyone, oh, what suits you? It's very hard to make opening hours suit everybody. But by other people in the team sharing what their challenges were and understanding that this person physically was finding it so stressful to get in super early and super late, then somebody else said, well, actually, I don't have a problem with doing earlies. And somebody else said, well, I don't have a problem with doing lates. And then all of a sudden they decided amongst themselves, so they had autonomy over that change in decision. So they weren't forcing someone to come in early or late. And by removing that particular stress, it meant that person could stay.
And so I think this is where in our scalability, where scalability is the first place we go to, this is a lot of things that we miss. We're not compromising the needs of the business by listening and creating an environment for collaboration. In most cases, if you have the right people on your team, because there are people that they're not invested and they will make it about them, and that doesn't help the business. But if you've got the right team, I think that in my experience, that happens much less of the time. What happens more of the time now is you have people engaged in ownership because they have a say. And there's a higher level of accountability in that. There's one level of accountability and like, look, you have the early shift and I expect you to show up on time and be responsible versus, okay, well, here's a problem for you. I expect you to be part of this solution. That's a much higher level of accountability and ownership. So when it comes to, I don't know what's expected of me, I feel like I have no autonomy. I feel like no matter what I do, tomorrow's going to be the same as today. Those are all the things that contribute to burnout. So what you have now is someone who's more suited for the morning, more suited for close. You have people that are more awake, more engaged, more invested, interfacing with people who the smallest nuances of that interaction determines whether or not a customer, however they show up, is likely to come back or not come back. So you are driving the outcomes of the business by incorporating people in their own solutions and spending a little bit more time in that root cause analysis. And I think that's one of the things where it's this rinse, wash, repeat, where people are not invested, that causes burnout. So you got to ask yourself this question. If you take a look, we know people who are more engaged in their job are far more productive. They're more productive. They perform better. Organizations that have highly engaged people are nearly 10% more profitable, which is like significant. But if you look at Gallup's research, 79% of anyone working today worldwide, right? So this is not like, well, 79% of Londoners report that, or, New Yorkers are stating. This is global. 79% of people are disengaged, actively disengaged in their work. So burnout is a leading cause. But are people burnt out and therefore disengaged, which makes sense? Or are they coming into work disengaged? And that resorts to burnout. Like one of my favorite stories. People are sick of hearing me tell. I am sick of hearing me tell this story, but there's so many ways to tell it. And there's
So I
so
have to
many
listen to this again.
again about those about the traveler and the stonecutters, right? They're out there doing the same job. The work is brutally hard. So it takes a lot of skill and precision, but it also takes a lot of brute force and effort. And the hours are very, very long. So this is not an easy job. And one person is like, well, I'm a stone cutter, is his response to the question, what do you do? And the other person is a magnificent cathedral builder. And the reason why I love that story is imagine these two people are never going to advance, right? They're never going to become the foreman, the manager, which I don't, what?
The capital dream.
I don't understand why that is the goal, right? If I'm an artist and I love working with a canvas, managing the art gallery is not my highest aspiration. I don't know why in corporations it's either up or stagnation. I think lateral can be beautiful. I think that contributes to burnout, but that's a whole different tangent. Let's assume these people are going to be in the same job for the rest of their lives. Who's working harder? Right? And that's the question. And a lot of people would say, well, clearly the second stonecutter. I mean, this guy is like so engaged in his work. He's inspired. He's going to put more effort. No, his job's not nearly as hard as that first one, who doesn't see the meaning and the purpose, doesn't have any sense of autonomy. My boss tells me to do this and I'm cutting stones and it sucks, but my family depends on me. So I'll do the best job I can. Man, every day is so much more of a struggle than the person who comes inspired and feels like I am building something of value. There is meaning here. There is beauty here. That person is not working nearly as hard, but probably producing just as high quality or better quality work than the first one. So lack of engagement isn't just a problem for organizations. It's a problem for the person who's not engaged. And we have this whole thing about quietly quitting.
Yeah.
All right. While I understand the sentiment, I think that is the worst thing someone can do. Because if you want, like, think about times in your career, Joe, where you were not burnt out at all, where you were so engaged. And I guarantee you it's not, well, during these 2 years, my workload was so light that I wasn't burnt out. And I was getting a lot of rest and recovery, and I had strict boundaries. Like, that's it. 5 p.m., I'm done. That was not it. That was not it at all. You were probably working your ass off. It's like, oh, I was learning this new skill and I was in this position, but I went and I saw a speaker and I thought I could be doing that and I could have that knowledge. And I could be, so you were like going through your shift, you were working all day. Then you went home and it's like you hit the books. You were probably working more hours when you were feeling the least burnt out. It's not just the workload. It's how you engage in work. And are you even engaged in work? I think that's when I look at burnout. To me, it's triphasic.
In that Gallup study, I think what I found quite interesting was what were the reasons that someone said they felt disengaged. And you've already covered some of those, which was not being listened to. So management not listening, also managers not being listened to as well. But the other one was lack of autonomy. having a choice, having a say, feeling heard again. So coming back to that communication, um, expectations, a misalignment of whatever that is, of what those expectations were. I think the other one was what you mentioned there as well, which was that ability to either progress or go lateral, not knowing what the options were, not having the support and the
Mhm.
resources to feel like they were actually progressing. So I thought that was really interesting that you said all of those things that were on that report of why someone might
Mhm.
feel disengaged. And I recently heard, and I don't know where I heard this from, part two of the Stonecutter story.
There's
So
a part
there's
two.
the
What happened? Tell
sequel.
me.
There's the sequel. So in this film, there were two stonecutters, and
What
they were
film is this? Is this like
the
did
stone.
Marvel put this out? It
Yeah,
turns out the Stonecutter was Thor with Mjolnir. He was so productive.
and they both start early doors. And in this scenario, they're still never going to do anything else. So we've got rid of the you can change your stars. No, they both had the same job, and it was really really hot, and they were trying to get, they had an amount of stone that they needed to get through by the end of the day, and each day stonecutter number one was exhausted and never took any breaks, didn't feel like he could take any breaks at all. And then there was stonecutter number two, who at lunchtime, tick tock, off he went home, had a little nap, a little bit to eat. I don't know what it was, cheese sandwich probably, if he was British. And then
Sandwich.
a cheese sandwich, and then he
It was a
came
very
back
popular medieval meal. Yeah.
with peri peri sauce. And so he'd have his cheese sandwich and come back, start back in the afternoon, and still outproduce the stonecutter number one. And stonecutter number one was doing his best. He wasn't moving from the side. And he was like, why? How come each day you're getting through not only all the expected work, but more? And you go off.
So yesterday, I was on Craig Harper's podcast, The You Project, which I'm a regular guest, and we were talking about our mentors and what our mentors have taught us. And one of the mentors that came up was David Barton, right? David Barton is the brain behind David Barton Gym. That's obvious. It's right in the name. He's the founder of Temple, the exclusive health club chain now. His newest project is You, is the name of the
Hey,
gym. You, yeah. So yeah, he's responsible for you. You can thank him later. And she's like, David Barton's my real dad. No, anyway, so we're getting off topic. One of the like David taught me so much, and I remember there was this incident at work where we were usually spot on, like mid-month close out. We were usually quite ahead, very productive team. But it was early in the month, and we hadn't yet built enough momentum in terms of revenue and weekly session count. And I got in a lot of trouble because there was one of our managers at a location was just popping in, like staying for like an hour a day, coming in with all her shopping bags and then popping out. And so, really, earning a very good wage as an exempt employee and just working like an hour a day. And obviously, David's like, "How are you allowing this to happen?" So we both get pulled in, and he says something in the meeting that stuck with me. He's like, "I hire you for your brain, not your hands." And what he meant by that is, I want an outcome from you. And he was like, if we're not where we need to be in our targets, I don't ever want you leaving here. I want to see you here all the time, all day, every day. He's like, if we're on track, we're hitting our targets. I don't care how many hours you work. I don't care if you pop in and pop out. And it was like, I'm paying you not for your effort, but for your outcome. Now, to produce an outcome, you need to focus on effort. But as an owner, he wasn't worried about that. He's like, okay, what's the outcome? So if popping out in the middle of the day and taking a break re-engages you, and you come in and you could train better, you could develop better, you could think clearer, you could problem solve more effectively, you could sell more effectively, by all means, right? As long as you're producing those outcomes. And what I've seen now is we're taking a far more administrative approach to work, which is very dangerous for people because if AI is going to replace anyone, it's going to replace the people that do repetitive tasks. It's not going to replace the people that are selling stuff, right? It's not going to replace the trainer on the floor that is dynamic and is a brilliant communicator, in addition to understanding the physical sciences that are necessary to bridge the gap between where the client is and where they want to be. It's not those people. It's the repetitive task people. But we're moving towards, well, if I'm paying you for this, I want to see you at your desk. Versus, yeah, you need to be in meetings, right? You need to show up for things you need to show up for. If you're a trainer and you get a client at 9 a.m., I expect you there at 8:45. But beyond that, I think people need the autonomy to figure out how they work best. And it is that, like, hey, if you're taking 15 minutes or you're letting your mind wander a bit, or you're not actually at your desk from 2 to 3, I don't care. Like,
Mm.
what is the environment that you work best within? And
And
I feel like we're moving away from that.
and potentially it's better to take a break.
So much better.
You
And
know,
I know, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, no. But to come back, if we looked at the stone merchant's productivity, the guy
Mhm.
that wasn't leaving the post, his productivity was dropping and slowing as he was fatiguing.
Yeah.
Whereas the other guy, he went home and he got reinvigorated by his cheese and peri peri sandwich, and he came back and he's on fire.
And
And
here's what we don't talk about, right? Let's say they're still doing the same quality work, right? It's arguable that stonecutter number two has the mental faculties to produce more and more efficiently and effectively than stonecutter number one. But even if he doesn't, they're both impacting everyone around them. So if stonecutter number one is working harder but is less productive, there will be people on that team that are less productive because of the proximity to him. And the greater the proximity, the greater the outcome. And that is, I mean, I'm very fond of the work of Christakis and Fowler and how they map how proximity and the epidemiology of anything unfolds. And all behaviors are communicable, they are contagious, in fact. So you better have highly engaged people on your team because it's not about the individual. It's about what they bring or take from that culture. I mean, I know that when I was working and my job was being on the road most of the time and writing. On days when I was on the road, like I was speaking when I needed to speak. Like there's no getting around that. So people knew exactly where I was. But when I was home and I had article deadlines, like I knew I was up working at 5 o'clock in the morning. But when it came to 2 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, if I didn't have any meetings, I was doing nothing. I was sleeping. I was at the gym, and then at 10 o'clock at night, I was writing my articles. Why? Because I'm more creative and I'm more productive at 5:30 in the morning, and I'm far more productive at 9 o'clock at night. That's my cycle. Now, if you were like, well, I want you working from 8 to 6 because that's when we work, my articles I would have produced would have been shit. Would have taken me twice as long to produce them. Like, why do you care? That makes absolutely no sense. I'm not saying the articles that I produced were great. They might have very well been shit anyway, but they would have been much worse if I was working outside of my creative zone. I understand not everybody has the ability to do that. Some people have this, like, nobody works 9 to 5 anymore, but they have this 8 to 6 reality. But other than that, if you're like really productive in the evening and you take an hour break in the afternoon, who cares about this stuff? Because when you let people structure their own work life, they actually wind up working more, not less.
yeah, I think what you just said, I know that we haven't got time to go into this because I realize you've got to go.
Oh my goodness.
But
I gotta run. I'm so
you
sorry.
go and I will finish that off so people
Bye.
can hear what I was going
Sorry.
to say. It's okay, bye bye. What I was going to say was that what was great about Bobby just giving that last example was that having that autonomy to be able to work when you want. But what I liked was the question of why. Why does our boss want us to work in a certain time slot? Or why are we given these boundaries? And a lot of that can come down to control. And that's definitely something that probably needs to be talked about on the next podcast. One of my favorite bits about today was we talked about burnout and what was burnout. And I think one of the actual definitions of burnout is when you get to that point where anxiety, stress starts to cause not only disengagement, but apathy. And that's when it's considered burnout, and it's within the workplace. And that's what makes it different from chronic stress in life. It's not so much about our family life, although those things can certainly influence burnout at work. But if we are leaders, or if we work in a team and we notice that someone's posture changes, that they come in repeatedly looking like they're irritable, that they don't care, then check in on them, because they could be some of the first early signs that somebody is struggling. And if we can give them an opportunity to share what they're struggling with and then take action on that, because it could be as simple as changing something within the workplace to be more suitable, like the example of not being able to open up the facility, getting somebody else to take that stress. Or maybe it's to have clarity over what is expected in their job role. Maybe checking in on what resources they have. And the big thing that really hits home from today's podcast is communication, because we really didn't get past phase one, that ability to ask questions, see how somebody else is feeling, hold space without any form of judgment, and allow them to discover what's important to them or what potentially is making them feel more stressed, disengaged, unsupported in that workplace. And then hopefully by doing that, they can feel listened to, they can feel heard. That in itself might help remove that risk of burnout. And then we'll get to phase 2 and 3 next week. Oh yeah, there was also a book that I read following on from the story of jobs taking us a certain amount of time, and it's a book called The Best a Man Can Get, and he's actually in marketing. And what he does is when he takes on a job, he will say, oh, this is going to take me 5 months or 4 months, whatever it is, and he will obviously give the quote for the job based on, well, it's going to take me 4 months of my time. But it never takes him 4 months of his time. But he felt like that was the best way to create a value to what he did. But actually, someone's really paying for his creativity and his mind. But he didn't feel like he could justify asking for that pay rate. So he would say 5 months or whatever it was. And he would go and live in a different flat and play computer games, maybe do some creative writing, do anything but the marketing job, until right at the end, and he would churn it out in an afternoon, in a couple of hours. But because he had taken the time frame that he set, they were happy and he was happy. Now, I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do, but it was just interesting on those expectations that we have. And it's a great book. On that note, I shall see you next week. Thank you very much, Bobby, and I'll see you soon.